Park Dae-ho stood in the massive crystal chamber and watched as thousands of alien beings filled the seats around him. The Galactic Council meeting hall stretched so far that he could barely see the other side. Each species had their own section, with special air and gravity controls. Some breathed methane, while others needed heavy gravity to survive. The humans had a small platform near the back, because Earth was still new to galactic politics. Dae-ho wore his best diplomatic uniform, and tried to look calm even though his heart was beating fast. Next to him sat Kim So-ra, his chief aide, who always knew what was happening before anyone else did. She had her datapad ready and was already reading the emergency session documents that had just been released. "This is bad," So-ra whispered to him in Korean. "Very bad." The massive screens around the chamber lit up with the symbol of the Hegemony Coalition. Dae-ho knew that symbol meant trouble. The Hegemony was a group of 47 warrior species who loved to fight and conquer other worlds. Their leader was King Vorthak, a massive alien who stood 3 meters tall and had scales like armor covering his body. When King Vorthak walked into the chamber, every conversation stopped. His footsteps echoed like thunder on the crystal floor. Behind him came his generals and advisors, all wearing black military uniforms with red markings that showed their rank. The peaceful species in the chamber moved away from the hegemony delegation like they were afraid of getting too close. Chancellor Theiss called the session to order. The old reptilian leader had been running council meetings for over 200 years and had seen many wars start and end. His voice carried across the chamber without any technology help, because his species could make sounds that traveled through any atmosphere. "We are here because of serious charges brought by the Hegemony Coalition against the human species," Chancellor Theiss announced. "King Vorthak will present evidence of human violations of the Terran Containment Accords." Dae-ho felt his stomach drop. The Terran Containment Accords were the peace treaty that Earth signed 50 years ago when humans first made contact with the galactic community. The treaty said that humans could only have small defensive fleets and could not build certain types of weapons. In return, other species would not attack human worlds, and humans could trade with the galaxy. King Vorthak stepped forward to the center speaking platform. When he spoke, his voice was like rocks grinding together. "Members of the Council, I bring you proof that the humans have broken every promise they made. They have built secret fleets of warships. They have created weapons that can destroy entire star systems. They have been planning to attack peaceful worlds and take them for their own empire." The chamber erupted in shocked voices from hundreds of different species. Some made clicking sounds while others roared or whistled. Dae-ho had never heard the council chamber so loud and angry before. Holographic displays appeared above the speaking platform, showing what looked like massive human space fleets. The ships were larger than anything Earth had ever built, and carried weapons that Dae-ho did not recognize. The displays showed human soldiers attacking alien colonies and taking prisoners for experiments. "These images were taken by our intelligence operatives over the past 2 years, King Vorthak continued. "The humans have been hiding these fleets in empty star systems beyond their claimed territory. They have been testing their planet-killer weapons on uninhabited worlds and planning their invasion routes." More displays showed what appeared to be human scientists working on biological weapons designed to kill specific alien species. The evidence looked very real and very damning. Dae-ho knew that none of it was true, but he could see that many council members were already convinced. A small blue alien from the Peaceful Traders Union stood up and asked, "How do we know these images are real and not fabricated?" King Vorthak gestured to one of his advisors who stepped forward. "We have 3 human defectors who will testify about these secret programs. They risked their lives to bring us this information because they could not stand to see their species become galactic conquerors." 3 humans in prison uniforms were brought to the speaking platform. Dae-ho did not recognize any of them, but they looked tired and scared. One by one, they gave testimony about secret military bases and hidden weapon factories on human worlds. They talked about plans to attack the Council and enslave other species. Dae-ho knew the testimony was fake, but it sounded very convincing. The defectors knew details about human technology and military structure that would be impossible to fake, unless someone had spent years preparing them. This was not a simple lie told quickly. This was a massive deception that had taken years to plan and execute. Sora was typing rapidly on her datapad, checking the defectors against Earth's citizen database. After a few minutes, she showed Deho her screen. All 3 defectors were listed as missing persons who had disappeared during trading missions to Hegemony Space over the past 3 years. They were kidnapped and brainwashed, Sora whispered. Probably drugged and tortured until they believed the lies themselves. Chancellor Thys called for order and turned toward the human delegation. Ambassador Park Dae-ho, you may respond to these accusations. Dae-ho stood and walked to the speaking platform. Every eye in the massive chamber was watching him. He could feel the weight of his species' survival resting on his shoulders. If the Council voted to authorize military action against humanity, the hegemony fleets could destroy every human world within months. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Dae-ho began in his calmest, diplomatic voice. The evidence you have seen today is false. These images have been fabricated, and these testimonies have been coerced. Earth does not have secret fleets or planet-killer weapons. We have maintained every part of the Terran Containment Accords for 50 years. Where is your proof that this evidence is false? King Vorthak demanded. You cannot simply deny what we all can see with our own eyes. Dae-ho had been expecting this question. I request 72 hours to gather counter-evidence and expert analysis of the materials presented today. Any fabricated images or false testimonies will be exposed by proper scientific examination. The chamber filled with voices again as different species debated whether to give humans time to defend themselves. Some species that had been trading, partners with Earth for decades, spoke in favor of waiting for more evidence. But many others seemed convinced that the hegemony proof was real and that humans were a threat that needed to be stopped immediately. King Vorthak raised his massive arms for silence. Every hour we delay gives the humans more time to prepare their attack fleets. They could launch their invasion while we are still debating whether they are guilty. I demand an immediate vote on authorization for defensive military action, Chancellor. Thys looked uncomfortable with the demand for immediate action, but several other species were already calling for a vote. The political pressure was building to act quickly rather than wait for more investigation. We will recess for 1 hour to allow delegations to consult with their governments, Chancellor Thys announced. Then we will return for preliminary voting. As the chamber began to empty, Sora leaned close to Dae-ho and whispered urgently, I have been monitoring hegemony military communications. They have already deployed advanced fleets toward human space. This whole session is just theater, to give them legal justification for an attack they have already started. Dae-ho felt a chill run down his spine. The hegemony was not just planning to attack humans after getting council approval. They were already moving their forces into position while the council debated. Win or lose the vote, human worlds were going to be under attack within days. He looked around the chamber and realized that normal diplomacy was not going to save his species. The evidence against humanity was too well crafted and too convincing. Even if he could prove it was false, the investigation would take weeks, while hegemony fleets destroyed human colonies. He needed a different kind of solution, one that would stop this war before it could begin. As he walked back to the human delegation platform, Dae-ho began to think about options that were not in any diplomatic handbook. The voting session was a disaster for humanity. Dae-ho sat in his chair and watched as species after species cast their votes for military action against Earth. The final count was 847 in favor of authorizing defensive measures against humanity and only 23 opposed. Even some of Earth's former trading partners had voted against them. King Vorthak stood at the speaking platform with his arms raised in victory while his generals cheered behind him. The massive alien looked directly at Dae-ho and smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. It was clear that this had all been planned from the beginning, and that the hegemony had been building support for months before calling this emergency session. After the session ended, Dae-ho and Sora returned to their small embassy building, near the council complex. The building was supposed to be secure, but both of them knew that the hegemony probably had listening devices everywhere. They would have to be very careful about what they said and did. Contact Lee Tae-min through the quantum channel, Dae-ho told Sora once they were in the secure communications room. We need to know what the hegemony forces are really doing. Sora activated the quantum communicator, which used entangled E. particles to send messages that could not be intercepted or decoded by anyone else. It took several minutes to establish a connection with Lee Tae-min, who was operating deep inside hegemony territory under a false identity. When Tae-min's face appeared on the screen, he looked tired and worried. He had been living among the hegemony species for 8 months, gathering intelligence and trying to understand their real plans. His Korean features had been surgically altered to look more like a species that was allied with the hegemony, and he wore the clothing and identification of a metal trader. "The situation is worse than we thought," Tae-min said without any greeting. "The hegemony fleets that are moving toward human space are not coming to fight humans. They are coming to harvest humans." Dae-ho felt his blood turn cold. "What do you mean by harvest?" "I have been listening to military communications for weeks," Tae-min explained. "The hegemony has been studying human biology and technology. They want to capture human scientists and engineers to work on new weapons. They also want to use human genetic material to create enhanced hegemony soldiers." Sora leaned forward toward the screen. "Do you have proof of this?" Tae-min nodded and transmitted a data package through the quantum channel. "I managed to copy files from a hegemony military computer. The files show detailed plans for capturing human colonies intact and taking prisoners for experiments. They have been planning this for over 3 years. As Sora opened the files, Dae-ho saw shipping manifests for prison ships, biological research equipment, and something called enhancement chambers. The hegemony was not planning a quick war to eliminate humanity. They were planning a systematic capture and exploitation program that would keep humans alive as slaves and test subjects. "There is more," Tae-min continued. "I have been tracking the disappearances of peaceful species over the past 5 years. At least 12 different species have vanished completely, and the hegemony has been blaming their disappearances on human raids. But I found evidence that the hegemony captured these species themselves and has been keeping them as slaves on hidden worlds." Dae-ho realized that humanity was being framed for crimes that the hegemony had committed against other species. The disappeared species were not extinct, they were prisoners. And now the hegemony was using their disappearances as evidence that humans were dangerous aggressors who needed to be stopped. "We need to contact Choi Hai-wan," Dae-ho said to Sora. "If anyone can make sense of hegemony behavior patterns, it will be her." Choi Hai-wan was Earth's best xenobiologist and had spent years studying alien cultures and psychology. She was currently working at a research station in human space, but she had access to extensive databases about every known species in the galaxy. It took an hour to establish a secure connection with Hai-wan because her research station was already under communications blackout due to the military situation. When her face finally appeared on the screen, she was clearly working in emergency conditions with alarms flashing in the background. "I have been analyzing hegemony behavior since the council session was announced," Hai-wan said immediately. "The timing of their accusations against humanity fits a biological pattern that occurs in the dominant hegemony species every 30 to 40 years. "What kind of pattern?" Dae-ho asked. "The Corvani, who make up the leadership of the hegemony, have a biological need for large-scale conflict every few decades," Hai-wan explained. "It is similar to a migration instinct in Earth animals, but instead of moving to new territory, they need to conquer new territory. If they do not get large-scale warfare regularly, their population becomes unstable, and they start fighting among themselves." Sora was taking notes as fast as she could type. "So this whole war against humanity is just an excuse for them to satisfy their biological urges?" "Not just an excuse," Hai-wan said. "It is a necessity for their species' survival. King Vorthak had to find a target for conquest or face civil war among his own people. Humans were chosen because we are new to galactic politics and do not have many strong allies." Dae-ho stood up and began pacing around the small communications room. Everything was starting to make sense now. The hegemony had not suddenly decided that humans were a threat. They had been planning this war for years because they needed a war to keep their society stable. The fabricated evidence and false testimonies were just tools to get council approval for what they were going to do. "Anyway, there is one more thing," Hai-wan added. "I have been analyzing the genetic data that Tae-min sent about the hegemony enhancement programs. They are not just planning to use human prisoners for labor. They want to create hybrid soldiers that combine human intelligence and creativity with Corvani physical strength and aggression. A master race, Sora said quietly. Exactly, Haiwan confirmed. Once they perfect the enhancement process using human genetic material, they will have soldiers that are superior to both species. Then they can conquer the entire galaxy without needing the Council's approval for anything. Daiho realized that this was not just about humanity's survival anymore. If the hegemony succeeded in their plans, every peaceful species in the galaxy would eventually be conquered or enslaved. The Council vote had not just authorized an attack on human worlds, it had authorized the beginning of galactic domination by the most aggressive species in known space. He looked at the tactical displays, showing hegemony fleet movements and human defensive positions. Earth's small defensive fleets were already moving to intercept the advancing hegemony forces, but everyone knew they could not win a direct military confrontation. Humanity had been limited to defensive weapons by the Terran Containment Accords, while the hegemony had been building conquest fleets for decades. "We need to contact General Krex," Daiho said suddenly. Sora looked surprised. The hegemony military commander? Why would he help us? Because he is not Corvani, Daiho explained. His species joined the hegemony through conquest, not choice. If we can make him understand that this war is about Corvani biological urges, rather than actual military necessity, he might question his orders. General Krex belonged to a species called the Thrakari, who valued honor and military discipline above everything else. They had been conquered by the hegemony 50 years ago, but had earned respect through their fighting ability and had been integrated into the hegemony military structure. Krex had risen to become one of King Vorthak's most trusted commanders, but he was not genetically programmed to need constant warfare like the Corvani were. "How do we contact him without revealing our intelligence sources?" Sora asked. Daiho thought for a moment. "We arrange a private meeting under diplomatic protocols. I will request a formal discussion about preventing civilian casualties during the upcoming military action. It is a reasonable request that fits with human diplomatic behavior." While Sora worked on arranging the meeting, Daiho began planning what he would say to General Krex. He could not directly reveal the intelligence that Taemin had gathered, but he could plant seeds of doubt about King Vorthak's true motivations. If Krex began questioning the necessity of this war, he might start his own investigation into hegemony plans. 2 hours later, Daiho found himself sitting across from General Krex in a neutral meeting room at the council complex. Krex was almost as large as King Vorthak, but had blue scales instead of red ones. His military uniform was covered with medals and honor markings that showed he had fought in dozens of battles across the galaxy. "I understand you wish to discuss civilian protection protocols," Krex said in a voice that sounded like metal scraping. "Against stone." "Yes," Daiho replied carefully. "Human civilians on our colony worlds include many families with children. If military action becomes necessary, I hope we can agree on methods to minimize harm to non-combatants." Krex studied Daiho for a long moment before responding. "You speak as if this war is inevitable. Do you not believe your species can prove its innocence?" Daiho chose his words very carefully. "I believe that some wars happen because they are needed by those who start them, regardless of the official reasons given." 3 days after the council vote, Daiho activated protocols that officially did not exist. He sent a coded message through diplomatic channels that would look like routine administrative communication to anyone intercepting it. But the message contained activation codes that would wake up assets that had been sleeping in deep cover for years. The first person to respond was Yoon Ji-hai, who had been working as a cultural attaché at the Human Embassy on the hegemony capital world for almost 2 years. To everyone around her, she was a friendly young woman who organized cultural exchange programs and helped human visitors understand local customs. In reality, she was one of Earth's most skilled infiltration specialists, trained in methods that were never written down in any official documents. Ji-hai's response came through a quantum channel that was hidden inside the normal cultural exchange data streams. Her message was simple. Assets in place, awaiting instructions. Daiho stared at the message for a long time before typing his reply. What he was about to order would cross lines that humanity had never crossed before in galactic politics. But The alternative was the systematic destruction and enslavement of his entire species, followed by the eventual conquest of every peaceful civilization in the galaxy. Target, primary. Method, natural. Timeline, before fleet contact. Authorization, 77 Alpha. Jihee's reply came back within minutes. Understood. Execution in 72 hours. While Jihai prepared for her mission, Daeho coordinated with Nam Hyun-woo, a tech specialist who had been working inside hegemony communication networks for over a year. Hyun-woo posed as a maintenance technician for the quantum relay systems that connected hegemony worlds. His job gave him access to almost every major communication hub in hegemony space. I have been mapping their entire network structure, Hyun-woo reported through encrypted channels. Their security is good, but they did not design it to keep out someone who has been working inside the system for months. I can access fleet communications, supply logistics, even personal messages between high-ranking officers. What have you found about their real plans? Daeho asked. Everything that Taemin reported is confirmed, Hyun-woo replied. But there is worse news. The hegemony has been building special facilities on 12 different worlds. These facilities are designed to process large numbers of prisoners from multiple species. They have medical research labs, genetic modification equipment, and something they call consciousness transfer systems. Daeho felt sick as he read the technical specifications that Hyun-woo had stolen from hegemony databases. The consciousness transfer systems were designed to extract memories and knowledge from prisoners' brains and implant them into hegemony soldiers. It was not just slavery or genetic experimentation, it was the complete theft of everything that made other species unique and valuable. How long have they been planning this? Daeho asked. Based on the construction timelines, at least 5 years, Hyun-woo answered. They started building these facilities before they even decided to target humanity specifically. They have been preparing for large-scale conquest and exploitation for years, and they were just waiting for the right opportunity to begin. As Daeho read through more of the stolen files, he realized that humanity's situation was even worse than he had thought. The hegemony was not just planning to attack human worlds and take prisoners. They were planning to completely erase human civilization and absorb everything useful into their own empire. Human technology, human knowledge, human creativity, even human memories would all become hegemony property. But there was one piece of information in the files that gave Daeho hope. The entire operation was being personally directed by King Vorthak himself. Every major decision had to be approved by the king, and every facility commander reported directly to him. If something happened to Vorthak, the whole operation would lose its central coordination and might collapse into chaos. Jihai sent another message. Target analysis complete. Biological vulnerabilities identified. Natural method confirmed feasible. Beginning final approach. Jihai had spent months studying Corvani biology and physiology while maintaining her cover as a cultural attaché. She had attended royal ceremonies, state dinners, and military parades where she could observe King Vorthak closely. She had also gained access to medical records through her cultural exchange programs, claiming that she needed to understand Corvani health practices to help human visitors avoid causing offense. What she had discovered was that aging Corvani, males were susceptible to a rare condition that caused sudden cardiac failure. The condition was triggered by stress and excitement, and it affected about 1 in every 1,000 Corvani who lived past their 200th year. King Vorthak was 230 years old and had been showing early symptoms of the condition for several months. More importantly, Jihai had found a compound from a plant that grew on several human-colonized worlds that could artificially trigger the same cardiac condition. The plant was used in traditional human medicine as a mild sedative, but when concentrated and modified slightly, it could cause exactly the same symptoms as the natural Corvani condition. The beauty of using this method was that Corvani medical experts would find exactly what they expected to find when they examined King Vorthak's body. There would be no trace of poison or foreign substances, just the natural biological markers of a condition that was well known to affect elderly Corvani males. Remember, Daeho sent to Jihai, this has to look completely natural. If there is any suspicion of assassination, it will make Vorthak a martyr and could make the situation worse instead of better. Understood, Jihai replied. The method I have chosen will be completely undetectable. When Corvani doctors perform their examination, they will conclude that the king died from natural causes brought on by the excitement of announcing his great military victory. While Ji-hai prepared for her mission, Dae-ho began setting up the political aftermath. He had Hyun-woo prepare data packages that would be automatically released through multiple channels after Vorthak's death. The packages contained evidence of the hegemony's true plans, documentation of their previous genocides against peaceful species, and proof that the charges against humanity had been fabricated. The timing would be crucial. The evidence had to be released soon enough after Vorthak's death that it would seem like brave hegemony officers were finally coming forward with the truth, but not so soon that it would seem planned or coordinated. Dae-ho also prepared messages for General Krex and several other high-ranking hegemony officers who were not from the Corvani species. These messages would plant additional doubts about Vorthak's motivations and encourage them to investigate the true scope of the king's plans. "What about Prince Vex?" Sora asked during one of their planning sessions. "He is Vorthak's heir and will take command when the king dies." Prince Vex was King Vorthak's eldest son, but he was known to be much more moderate than his father. He had spoken publicly about the need for the hegemony to focus on internal development rather than constant expansion. Many political analysts thought that Vex would eventually try to reform the hegemony into a more peaceful organization. "Vex is our best hope for preventing total chaos," Dae-ho replied. "If he can take control quickly after his father's death, he might be able to call off the attack on human worlds and start peace negotiations." "But what if the other hegemony generals do not accept his leadership?" Sora asked. "What if they try to continue the war without the king?" Dae-ho had been thinking about that possibility as well. "That is why we need to release the evidence about the true scope of Vorthak's plans. If the hegemony military realizes that they were being used for conquest rather than defense, some of them might refuse to continue following orders." On the day before Ji-hai's mission, Dae-ho received a final intelligence report from Tae-min that made him even more certain that he was making the right choice. Tae-min had discovered that the hegemony had already begun moving the 12 peaceful species they had been holding prisoner. The species were being transported to the new processing facilities where they would be used as test subjects for the consciousness transfer systems. "They are not waiting for the war against humanity to end," Tae-min reported. "They are already beginning the experimental phase of their program. Thousands of innocent beings are being subjected to medical torture right now while the galaxy thinks they are extinct." That night, Dae-ho could not sleep. He kept thinking about all the lives that hung in the balance and all the moral lines he was about to cross. He had been trained as a diplomat to solve problems through negotiation and compromise, not through violence and deception, but sometimes the peaceful solution was not possible, and sometimes the only way to save lives was to take a life. He thought about his own family back on Earth, and about all the human children who would grow up as slaves if the hegemony succeeded in their plans. He thought about the peaceful species who were already suffering in hegemony laboratories, and about all the other species who would suffer the same fate if Vorthak's empire continued to expand. By morning, Dae-ho had made peace with his decision. He sent the final authorization code to Ji-hai. "Execute on schedule for all of them." Ji-hai's response was immediate. King Vorthak stood on the great ceremonial platform overlooking the capital city of the hegemony homeworld. Millions of citizens filled the streets below, while billions more watched through live broadcasts across the galaxy. This was to be his greatest moment, the announcement of the final assault that would bring humanity under hegemony control and begin a new age of galactic conquest. Ji-hai stood among the honor guard, wearing the black and red uniform of a junior protocol officer. She had spent weeks working her way into the ceremony planning committee and had volunteered for extra duties that would place her close to the king during his speech. To everyone around her, she was just another dedicated young officer who wanted to serve her empire. The compound she had prepared was tasteless and odorless, designed to be absorbed through skin contact. She had applied it to the ceremonial documents that King Vorthak would hold during his speech. The amount was carefully calculated based on his body weight and the known progression of the cardiac condition that affected elderly Corvani males. "Citizens of the hegemony," King Vorthak began. his voice amplified across the planet and transmitted to every world in hegemony space. Today marks the beginning of our greatest victory. The humans who have threatened our peaceful expansion will finally face the consequences of their aggression. Ji-Hai watched as the king gestured with the ceremonial documents, his large hands making direct contact with the compound she had applied. The absorption would take about 20 minutes, and the effects would begin gradually, mimicking exactly how the natural condition progressed. Our fleets are already in position around human worlds, Vorthak continued. Our scientists have prepared facilities to study human technology and biology so that we can better defend ourselves against future threats. The galaxy will see that the hegemony protects all peaceful species from human expansion. As the king spoke about protection and defense, Ji-Hai thought about the real facilities that were waiting for human prisoners. She had seen the intelligence, reports about the consciousness transfer systems and the genetic modification laboratories. She knew that King Vorthak was not talking about defense at all, but about the systematic destruction of human civilization and the theft of everything that made humans unique. 15 minutes into the speech, King Vorthak paused and put his hand to his chest. The movement looked like a natural gesture to emphasize a point, but Ji-Hai could see that he was beginning to feel the first effects of the compound. His heart rate was starting to increase and his breathing was becoming slightly irregular. "The human fleet has already attempted to intercept our forces," Vorthak announced, his voice becoming more excited as he described the military situation. "But their small defensive ships cannot stand against the combined might of 47 warrior species. By the end of this week, every human world will be under hegemony protection." The crowd below cheered and roared approval as their king described the coming victory. The excitement in the air was infectious, and even the honor guard around Ji-Hai were showing signs of the aggressive enthusiasm that Corvani felt when anticipating battle. King Vorthak raised his arms above his head in triumph, and Ji-Hai could see that his hands were beginning to shake slightly. The compound was working exactly as planned, triggering the same biological responses that natural stress would cause in an elderly Corvani male with the cardiac condition. Today, the galaxy will remember that the hegemony does not tolerate threats to galactic peace, Vorthak declared. The humans will learn that their deceptions and their secret weapons cannot protect them from justice. We will take their worlds, we will study their technology, and we will ensure that they never again threaten the safety of peaceful species. As the king spoke these words, his voice became strained, and his breathing became visibly labored. The AUS compound was now fully in his system and was beginning to affect his cardiovascular function. To the crowd and the cameras, it looked like he was overcome with emotion at the thought of his great victory. "My people," Vorthak said, his voice rising. "To a climax, today we begin the greatest expansion in hegemony history. Today we show the galaxy that no species can hide behind lies and deception when they threaten the peace that we have built. Today we prove that the hegemony will always protect the innocent from those who would harm them." King Vorthak raised his arms again and opened his mouth to deliver his final words. But instead of speech, only a choking sound came out. His massive body swayed for a moment as his heart began to fail, exactly as it would have if he had suffered from the natural progression of the cardiac condition. The king collapsed on the platform in front of billions of viewers across the galaxy. His personal guards rushed to his aid, while medical teams ran onto the platform with emergency equipment. Ji-Hai stepped forward with the other protocol officers to help clear space for the medical teams, playing her role perfectly as a concerned subordinate. The royal physicians worked frantically to revive their king, but the compound had triggered a complete cardiac failure that was indistinguishable from the natural condition. After 20 minutes of emergency treatment, the chief physician stood up and announced to the crowd what everyone could already see. King Vorthak was dead. The reaction across hegemony space was immediate and chaotic. Prince Vex was attending a military conference on another world and would not be able to return to the capital for several hours. In the meantime, 3 different generals claimed temporary authority and began issuing conflicting orders to the hegemony fleets. General Krex, who was commanding the forces advancing toward human space, received orders from General Thane to continue the attack as planned. But 30 minutes later, he received different orders from General Kothar to hold position until Prince Vex could take command. A third general, Vex's uncle Murdoch, sent orders to begin immediate retreat because he claimed that attacking without the king's direct leadership would be dishonorable. The confusion spread throughout the hegemony military as different officers tried to decide which general to obey. Some commanders continued advancing toward human positions, while others stopped to wait for clarification. Several units actually began fighting each other when they received contradictory orders from different sources. Daiho watched the chaos unfold from the human embassy on Nexus Prime. The news broadcasts were showing riots in the streets of several hegemony worlds as different factions began fighting over who should succeed King Vorthak. The carefully planned invasion of human space was falling apart as the hegemony turned its attention inward. Begin releasing the intelligence packages, Daiho ordered Hyunwoo. Start with the evidence about the previous genocides and the hidden prisoner facilities. Within hours, news networks across the galaxy were reporting shocking revelations about hegemony operations. The 12 peaceful species that had been thought extinct were discovered alive in hidden facilities. Documents, proving that the evidence against humanity had been fabricated, were leaked to major news organizations. Most damaging of all, the technical specifications for the consciousness transfer systems and genetic modification laboratories were released to the galactic scientific community. General Krex was among the first high-ranking hegemony officers to speak publicly about the revelations. In a broadcast from his command ship, he announced that he was suspending all offensive operations against human targets, pending a full investigation of King Vorthak's activities. "I swore an oath to defend the hegemony and protect innocent beings from aggression," Krex stated. "If these reports are true, then we have been used as tools for conquest rather than defense. I will not lead my soldiers in a war of aggression disguised as protection." Other hegemony commanders began making similar statements as the evidence continued to spread across galactic networks. The officer corps was splitting between those who wanted to continue Vorthak's plans and those who were disgusted by the revelations about their king's true intentions. Prince Vex finally returned to the capital 12 hours after his father's death and immediately called for a halt to all military operations. His first official act as the new leader was to order the release of all prisoners being held in the hidden facilities and to invite galactic inspectors to examine the consciousness transfer systems. "My father's death has revealed activities that were conducted without the knowledge of the legitimate hegemony government," Prince Vex announced in his first address to the galaxy. "I hereby renounce all claims of hegemony authority over human worlds and call for immediate peace negotiations with the Galactic Council." But not all hegemony forces accepted Prince Vex's authority. General Thane declared that the new leader was weak and unfit to command, and he called on loyal officers to continue the war against humanity. Several worlds in the outer regions of hegemony space declared independence rather than follow either Vex or Thane. The hegemony coalition, which had been the galaxy's most powerful military force just days before, was now fracturing into dozens of competing factions. Some groups continued to advance toward human worlds, but they were no longer coordinated and could be defeated by concentrated human defensive forces. Chancellor Thys called for an emergency council session to address the rapidly changing situation. 3 months after King Vorthak's death, the galaxy was a very different place. The hegemony coalition had broken apart into 17 separate factions, most of which were too busy fighting each other to threaten anyone else. Prince Vex controlled the largest faction and had signed formal peace treaties with both humanity and the Galactic Council. The other factions were either too small to be dangerous or were being contained by combined council forces. Daiho stood in his new office in the Council Security Directorate building and looked out at the busy spaceport below. Ships from dozens of species were arriving and departing every hour, carrying diplomats, traders, and refugees from the former hegemony territories. The galaxy was slowly healing from the crisis that had almost led to massive war and genocide. Dr. Han Soo-jin knocked on his door and entered carrying 2 cups of tea. She had been assigned as the chief psychological advisor to the Security Directorate and had been helping Daiho deal with the aftermath of his decisions during the crisis. Their sessions were officially about helping him adjust to his new responsibilities, but both of them knew they were really about helping him live with what he had done. The reports from the liberated facilities are getting better, Sujin said as she handed him one of the cups. The 12 species that were being held prisoner are all recovering well, and most of them have been able to return to their home worlds. Daeho took the tea but did not drink it immediately. How many died before we could reach them? The final count was just over 8,000 individuals across all 12 species, Sujin replied gently. But that means we saved over 200,000 who would have died if the hegemony programs had continued. The numbers should have made Daeho feel better about his choice to order King Vorthak's assassination, but instead they reminded him of how close the galaxy had come to something much worse. The consciousness transfer systems had been just weeks away from full operation when Vorthak died. If the king had lived long enough to complete his plans, millions of beings would have suffered the same fate as those 8,000. Any word from Ji-Hai? Daeho asked. Sujin smiled. She sent another message yesterday. Her tea shop on Kepler 7 is doing very well, and she has started teaching cooking classes to human colonists who want to learn traditional Korean recipes. Ji-Hai had retired from diplomatic service immediately after completing her mission and had used her savings to buy a small tea shop on a peaceful rim world. To everyone who knew her there, she was just a former embassy worker who wanted a quiet life away from galactic politics. Only Daeho and a few others knew that she had saved billions of lives with one perfectly executed assassination. Does she ever regret what she did? Daeho asked. She told me that she sleeps well at night, Sujin replied. She said that every time she starts to feel guilty, she remembers the intelligence reports about what the hegemony was planning to do to children from the captured species. Daeho nodded and finally took a sip of his tea. The psychological burden of ordering an assassination was something that would stay with him for the rest of his life, but it was a burden he could carry knowing that the alternative would have been much worse. Sora entered the office carrying a data pad with the daily intelligence briefing. She had been promoted to Deputy Director of Intelligence Analysis and was now responsible for monitoring potential threats throughout the galaxy. Her job was to make sure that no other species could build up the kind of hidden military capability that the hegemony had developed. The situation in the former hegemony territories is stabilizing, Sora reported. General Krex has agreed to serve as military advisor to Prince Vex's government, and they are working together to dismantle the remaining conquest infrastructure. What about the factions that refuse to accept peace? Daeho asked. General Thane's faction is down to just 3 star systems, and they are running out of supplies, Sora replied. Our intelligence suggests that most of his remaining forces will surrender or defect within the next month. The breakup of the hegemony had not been completely peaceful. Several hardcore factions had continued fighting for weeks after Vorthak's death, claiming that they would rather die than abandon their conquest goals. But without central coordination and supply lines, these factions had been unable to sustain military operations for long. There is other news, Sora continued. The Council has formally invited humanity to join the Security Directorate as a permanent member. The vote was unanimous. This was something that would have been impossible just months before. Human membership in the Security Directorate would give Earth a voice in galactic security decisions and access to military technology that had previously been restricted. It was recognition that humanity had proven itself capable of making the hard choices necessary to protect galactic peace. When is the ceremony? Daeho asked. Next week, Sora replied. Chancellor Theiss wants you to give the acceptance speech on behalf of humanity. Daeho looked out the window again and thought about what he would say to the assembled representatives of the galaxy. He could not tell them the truth about how the crisis had really been resolved, but he could talk about the importance of vigilance against those who would use deception and manipulation to start wars. Ambassador Thilla, from the former hegemony, territories requested a meeting that afternoon. She had been one of the first hegemony officials to speak out against Vorthak's policies after the truth was revealed, and she was now working with Prince Vex to reform the remaining hegemony government. I wanted to thank you personally for your role in stopping the war, Thilla said when she entered Daeho's office. My species was one of those that had been targeted for the consciousness transfer experiments. If King Vorthak had lived, my people would have been enslaved within the year. Daeho accepted her thanks gracefully, but he wondered how she would react if she knew the truth about how Vorthak had really died. Would she still be grateful if she knew that a human assassin had murdered the king during a public ceremony watched? By billions of beings? Your diplomacy during the crisis was remarkable, Thyla continued. Even when faced with overwhelming evidence against your species, you remained calm and focused on finding a peaceful solution. Sometimes the most important battles are fought with words rather than weapons, Daeho replied, choosing his words carefully. That evening, Daeho had dinner with Nam Hyun-woo and Lee Tae-min, who had both returned to normal duties after completing their intelligence missions. They met at a small Korean restaurant in the diplomatic quarter where they could speak freely without worrying about surveillance. Do you think we made the right choice? Taemin asked over bowls of kimchi soup. I think we made the only choice that could save lives, Hyun-woo replied. The intelligence we gathered showed that conventional diplomacy would never have stopped Vorthak's plans. Daeho listened to his colleagues discuss the moral implications of their actions. Both men had risked their lives gathering the intelligence that had made the assassination possible, and both were struggling with the knowledge of what they had helped accomplish. The hardest part for me, Taemin said, is knowing that history will remember King Vorthak as a leader who died trying to defend his people against human aggression. The galaxy will never know that he was actually planning genocide. Maybe that is better, Daeho said quietly. If the truth about his assassination ever came out, it could destabilize the peace we have built. Sometimes protecting peace requires accepting that history will not record the whole truth. They finished their dinner in contemplative silence, three men who had helped save the galaxy, but would never be able to tell anyone what they had really done. A week later, Daeho stood before the assembled Galactic Council to accept humanity's membership in the Security Directorate. The same chamber where humanity had been condemned as aggressors was now filled with applause as Earth joined the galaxy's most important security organization. Humanity accepts this responsibility with humility and determination, Daeho said in his acceptance speech. We have learned that peace requires constant vigilance against those who would use deception and fear to justify conquest. We pledge to work with all peaceful species to ensure that the galaxy never again faces the threat of systematic genocide disguised as defensive action. After the ceremony, Sora found Daeho in his office and asked the question that had been weighing on both of their minds. Do you regret what we did? Daeho thought for a long moment before answering. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that King Vorthak chose conquest over peace and forced us to make an impossible choice. But I do not regret saving billions of lives, even if the cost was my own peace of mind. Sora nodded. The intelligence reports estimate that Vorthak's plans would have led to the death or enslavement of over 50 billion beings across the galaxy. Against that number, one life seems like a small price to pay. One life, and the burden of those who ordered his death, Daeho corrected. We will carry this secret for the rest of our lives, and we will have to live with the knowledge of what we were capable of when pressed to the breaking point. As the months passed, the galaxy continued to heal and grow stronger. The former hegemony territories were reorganized into smaller, more peaceful governments.